Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Silicon Minds, Human Hearts. Today we'll be talking to Amy, who's the AI Advocacy Lead at Microsoft. Hi Amy, thank you for joining us today. For the ones who have not met you before, who are you?
Yeah, who am I? Goodness me. I am Amy Boyd. I lead a team of cloud advocates at Microsoft who focus on building your own custom AI using Azure. But I'm also a cloud advocate myself, so I also get to spend time with developers, focus on product experience as well as community, sort of building and driving, and content, of course, always creating content.
So, what is the day-to-day job of a cloud advocate?
Good question. No one day is ever the same, from week to month to year, I wouldn't say. So obviously we follow the latest and greatest that's happening at Microsoft in our tech. So one day we might be battling with something that's quite new, providing great product feedback, as a lady on my team, Nitya, calls it Developer Zero, which I love. Love that saying of just kind of, we're using this stuff kind of straight away and thinking all about that developer experience. How easy is it? How does the documentation work with it? Are there good samples? And if there isn't, we then move on to creating the content as well. So thinking about what is it that people are looking for, what is it that's missing from maybe some of just the pure documentation, or maybe some of the sort of getting started Microsoft Learn modules, for example. And then we might go where developers are. It's our key one, that's community. And so some days I'm in London speaking with technical community, other days it's much more heads down and focused on other things. So yeah, a real variety, definitely a job that is never boring.
Now, what prompts you in the field of AI?
What prompts me, as in like, how did I get here, sort of thing?
What interests you in the field of AI?
Oh, interests me. Oh, good question. So much of it. I think I've always had that drive with computer science in general, right? I think we all had that first program that you write that kind of gets to, you get a computer to like do something for you in some senses. What is that like power play that's going on? I don't know. But obviously loved it from that minute, but then kind of went and spent time with our search engine team at Microsoft. And I just really got into like data much more, and kind of the interesting patterns you can find with data. Data is obviously always equal to experience. It's almost like past experience. And there's a lot that you can tell from data. So I got quite fascinated. I always call myself like, that sounds a bit like big-headed, but I've often said like, I'm like the Sherlock Holmes of data. Like, I love the idea that it's like a problem to solve, or like a story to unearth in a data set. And actually it can guide you in, there's all sorts of stories in there that you probably don't know exist. And obviously from data fuels AI. And so I think AI then is the ability to be able to obviously show that those insights and predictions can lead to something as well. And so yeah, that's probably my favorite part of AI, might be the data.
Will we ever have an AI that can find all those stories automatically?
Who knows, right? I mean, it feels like it's more statistical type of machine learning, right? That was kind of data scientist era a few years ago. You got to go dive into that data. You got to go and ask those questions of it, understand its peaks and troughs and all of that kind of stuff. And then you as a data scientist would need to unearth what that story is and then tell it, obviously. And so there's so many tools as well to tell those data stories that are quite different from telling maybe other stories. So wouldn't it probably could, given a lot of its experience, but then sometimes I always like to go back to the piece where some of the most interesting data sets I've ever worked with have some kind of personal understanding or tie to as well. Obviously we can't have just like, it's not possible to have like every single type of person in the world to work on like a data science project or something like that. But I think being able to like bring a human insight into like, you know, I could be looking at a local data set or something like that. it might tell you one thing, but if you know that the real life situation is because of something that's not in the data set, then it's not necessarily a good sort of flag to kind of go after. So that's the only thing, like, would an AI be missing context because it would never be able to have that, like, well, what does real life look like sort of thing.
Since AI is always based on data, we know, or let's say look in humans' history, we've done things that are not correct, let's say it like that.
Yeah.
But of course that data is used now also
Yeah.
to train models. Do you think that's going to give influence into our decisions in the future?
Yeah, so this one's a really tricky one because we've spoken about, like, data bias. I read an incredible book called Invisible Women that was all about this. It was all about, like, gaps in data, just because of the time, the place, the culture, whatever it was at the time, that, you know, parts of our society might be missing from historical data. And so we saw that a lot when we were doing these more statistical machine learning models, and we'd say, you know, could you do all these different techniques to make sure, you know, that you were at least looking for these different skews and understanding if they're in there. I guess the other side of sort of, as we keep going, one of the things I like about AI in this moment is it is starting to get to that point where it is becoming slightly more democratized. I think the time that we're in where, like, I talk to my family about this technology. My family aren't in tech, right? So I'm the only one. So it's one of these ones where you're like, I can have a full conversation with them about all the different types of providers. They know about ChatGPT, they might know about Gemini or something like that. And it's fascinating because I've literally never had that in my whole career in tech, that having that conversation with people who aren't in the space. And for me, that, you know, older sort of leaps that we've made in tech, that feels the same. But the only thing I do love about the generative AI stuff at the moment is it could level some of the playing field as well, right? Like, it's not necessarily like who you have access to that can tell you all of the, how do I write the best CV, or how do I do this, or how do I do that. It can take it from everyone's experience, obviously, as long as you have access as well.
Exactly. Democratization is very good, but it also means it might be used in wrong hands.
Yes.
How do we protect that AI is used in a responsible way?
The used in the wrong hands is kind of that's the way, isn't it, to look at it. Like, all of these technologies are wonderful tools. They can turn into weapons as well. Another book I can recommend is a bit of a bookworm, Tools and Weapons by Brad Smith, if people haven't read it. Yeah, I was Chief Legal Officer. Honestly though, I don't know what this tells you about me. I actually read it on holiday. To me, it was like a story in some senses, and it was a story that I just didn't know the half of. You know, the move into cloud computing, and not just the technical side, but all else that comes with it when you start to really change the way things are done. And I think with AI, we're in that moment where it's been created as a tool, and actually there's so many cases where it is a wonderful tool, and there will be so many more as well, like, that are still to be unearthed, what the great examples are of it. You know, they're using this type of technology as most recent sort of leap. But the other side of it is then obviously, the weapons side of it. And I think that book just illustrates, like, open communication, having my favorite part of Microsoft's responsible AI strategy at the moment is the layers. So if anyone's got Shrek, like almost like layers of an onion type thing, it's the layers of the approach. There's no one thing that's like, if you do this one thing today, your AI is now responsible there. It also reminds me massively of security. Right? Security is all about layers, isn't it? Like, I remember when I first learned about security, is that like a triangle or something with 3 different edges? I probably should have researched this before doing this. And like, if you had all three, you probably just can't access anything. It's probably almost unusable technology. But as you ease into like two of the corners of the triangle, you might have to ease up on another one or something like that. So the idea of it's never possibly perfect, but then the ability for you to say, well, layers of defense. So where are the elements that we could catch if something wasn't going quite right? So is it at the policy level, which is much, much higher level to a developer building almost like an AI solution, right? But then you go right down to those technical layers and like, are we transparent that it's using AI, for example? A simple output, a simple visible piece of text on a screen. But then are we also using all of these great new tools with responsible AI? So content safety, evaluations, are we evaluating and testing our models properly? They're so incredible. At the moment, lots of them are quite general knowledge, right? There's lots of different things happening in that space. But if you like dig in a little bit, in most use cases, you don't necessarily need like the whole of the general knowledge. You almost want it to pinpoint in on something quite specific. And so measuring that it can do that and it doesn't go off on tangents, very, very useful. I'd like to encourage developers to do evaluations more and just think of it, it's not evaluations, it's just dev tests. That's all it is, just write tests for your...
Making sure there's layers before you reach something.
Yeah, I was going to say, or at least as well, like create it, and as people are using it, being able to monitor it. We've always had things like App Insights, for example. In Azure, it's called App Insights, but anything that gets telemetry, right, from your application. The same thing. Yeah, in fact, you need all of that now. And then maybe like a few extra pieces that you can add on. You can actually add them into dashboards and all that with Azure as well. And it's fascinating to see, like, how do you get the output of how relevant the responses are, how grounded the response is if you have data, or how fluent the response is. Do you remember, like, say, like early 2022? We were all like trying it out, right? Those like first initial prompts that you were writing. And one of the stranger things I said to someone, I think someone had used it quite early in like a document, and it had just like repeated itself like down the document. And I was like, no one, like, fun that you've used it, but like no one's checked this. Like someone has just dumped a load of stuff in here, maybe checked the start and gone, oh, that reads really nicely, that'll do, we'll start from there, sort of thing. And I was just like, no, this makes no sense. Or it would like strangely stop at the end of, like, in the middle of a sentence or something like that. I don't see that as much anymore, but it's fascinating to see that kind of thing. So responsible AI, layers, like it's all about the layers, but it's also actively in research still, right? As is most technology, but we have to like keep our eye on it. So as if there's not already enough just with the basics of generative AI tech, but actually the responsible side of it, kind of looking at, well, what is all of the different things in this space that I can do as a developer? The change in winds, I feel, is there is tools, and tools, I think, speak to technical people. It's like, there's a tool that can help me to do something. Whereas I think previously conversations just felt like it was a bit like, I really don't want to build something that goes wrong. There's almost like a worry around it, I think. And asking yourself, like, is this the right type of thing? That's just like table stakes, right? We should be asking ourselves, should we actually be building this? Should always just be a general question.
Because it also depends a bit on if you're building something for production for thousands of people, or you're experimenting. Because if you look at the libraries that are available, of new libraries, many of them are only in a beta.
Yes.
And are not, and even saying that, like, this is not production ready.
Yep.
Like the Nemo guardrails, which are really cool tools, but they explicitly say on their website, don't use it yet for production.
Yeah.
Because it's not fully ready yet.
But everything's being released earlier and earlier, right, as well. And although it can be frustrating sometimes when it doesn't quite do what you want it to do or something like that, the idea that we get to try it out, test it, understand, and start to envision what we can do with it, I think that's far more valuable. But like you said, it's got to be clear, I think, to set like developer expectations. Like, this is not quite sort of ready to go for production purposes yet, but it's...
I think the problem is no one wants to miss the train on the next big thing, so they're already...
it's definitely fast, isn't it? Goodness me out there. And I think, as advocates, trying to keep... Everyone asks at every...
Yeah, how do you do it?
How do you keep on track? There is no secret, like no one does. Like I keep saying to people, I'm like, get on, like not to advocates in the team, more so to like technical community, like just keep learning, just keep getting hands on and trying things out. And honestly, if you just spend, what I said, there's that habit thing of like 10 minutes a day, and like within 3 months you can be in the top like 5% of people with knowledge in some senses. Like I truly believe we're in that moment in some ways, that everyone is kind of crowding towards this type of technology, but realistically it's so new. And so learn and then share would have been my only obviously advice as well, which is what I do as a job, which is perfect.
And that was actually going to be my last question. What advice do you have for people?
Just that really. I think you've got to get hands, like you've got to go and try it. I think it's fascinating to see like day in the life off. I'm doing a bit of a mini part of a session in like, how am I using AI in my life? This is not a good thing to mention on camera, but like only 9 months ago, I was like, to people in my team, to my boss, I was like, I am not like living this AI dream. Like, are you living this AI dream? Like, I was really quite uncomfortable with the fact that I was like, I don't feel like I'm like 100% productive as I could be, or efficient. Like, and everyone's telling me there's all these amazing things, but I just don't feel like I've got into this like muscle memory of using it yet. So then I kind of outwardly went out of my way to ask anyone that would listen, like, are you using it? And I'd be like, what are you using it for? What's your favourite, most efficient thing it does for you? Fascinating to see how different everyone's answers is as well. And then had to go and like change my approach. So what my approach I've always felt like was like, if I've done something once, I can do it again and again and again. And I think second nature, you're spinning 1,000 plates on a daily basis. I just keep going back to doing it myself when I should have been offloading this.
And build an agent for it.
Yeah, exactly. And having other, maybe. And I think also like one of the things I found was control. Now you know more about me. I had a bit of an issue with like relinquishing some control as well, right? Like the email thing. I remember lots of people saying, I get it to like write my emails for me. And I'm like, number one, like I got it to do it once, and I felt like I write so many prompts. I was like, I may as well have just written this email. I'm tagging her, hi everyone, on the top, and thanks so much on the end. And I was like, I can't be doing this right. And then, but also what I found now is my favourite approach, so that I keep my tone and my style, which I like, there's reasons I use it in some senses, sometimes to catch attention maybe, or sometimes to, but I use it to summarise. Like definitely, which the irony is that was like the first use case, wasn't it? But I'll write the email and then I'll get it to word it just slightly better. And I felt like it's like, I don't know, it probably does almost the same thing, like either way, but that to me felt more comfortable. So you got to just like go use it, and almost like 9 months later I've suddenly realised I use it for like everything. Mm-hmm. I don't know how I do my global job now. Like I don't have to be on every call at 11 o'clock at night just to get information, and I don't need to spend my whole next morning just watching hours and hours of meeting recordings. The summary is perfection, right? Clicking on the bits I'm most interested in. My only concern always, and I don't know where this goes into like the future, right? If we continuously summarize, and we don't create new, at what point are we going to be summarizing summaries? Do you see what I mean? Like,
that's a good question.
Yeah, like that's my only, I don't know why I
until it's only one word?
I really would. Yeah. Done. I don't know. But so there's this one piece where there is so much value still I see in creative thinking, storytelling, things that are innately very human, in the sense that you can like there has to be still that like that great work to kind of get things done, but then obviously they will be summarized and taken. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that advice, Amy. Well, I'm for sure we'll see more of you on the Microsoft channels.
Of course.
And hope to see you soon again.
Yeah, so great to have. Thank you so much for having me.